Imagine walking into a room where everyone seems to speak a language you don't quite understand. Conversations flow around you, but you feel alone because you don't feel understood. The lights are too bright, the sound's too sharp, and the lesson on the board feels just out of reach. For many neurodivergent students, this isn't just a moment. It's their everyday reality, feeling isolated, misunderstood, or excluded. I'm Beck Woolnough, an educator of over 20 years and part of the team behind the research, Neurodiversity and Digital Inclusion, creating the conditions for inclusive education through universal design for learning. This research is world-leading, but also unique. Not only is it built on global best practice, but it's led by a team who bring both expertise and lived experience. At its core, it amplifies the voices of students and teachers, creating a framework for balancing the effective use of interactive, explicit teaching, aligned with the global movement towards harnessing the science of learning, while also providing for neurodiversity, affirming student agency and voice. We set out to create research that wasn't just for academics, but for educators, something practical, something that could be used tomorrow in classrooms around the world. We knew it would make an impact. We knew it could make a difference, but what we didn't expect was the impact it would have on us, as a team, as a company, and as individuals. When we first shared the findings internally, it sparked conversations we weren't expecting. Colleagues reflected on their own experiences, their children, their students, and even the workplace itself. And that's why we couldn't think of a better way to begin sharing this research than through our own stories. Whether you're neurotypical, neurodivergent, with a diagnosis, undiagnosed, but you and everyone else suspects, or like me, peer-reviewed. Whether you're a student, educator, parent, or professional, our hope is that you find meaning, support, and inspiration in this work just as we have. Because inclusion isn't a concept, it's a commitment, and it starts here.
Hello, I'm Mark Cartwright, former educator of just over a decade in the classroom in the UK, now doing professional development for SMART. And what that research really brought home to me is actually that it's this by design. That by design, SMART's product and our classrooms can be not just there for the neurodiverse, but there for everybody. Just posing this question, do you know somebody else that learns the same as you? Chances are probably not. That we don't know how each other learn because we all got our own little nuances, and that's exactly the same for the teachers. That when they go into the classroom, they've got the classroom in front of them, either in the first few weeks or even later on, that we haven't quite figured out how these students are learning. But through the research, through the recommendations, through things in the technology, actually all of those, a lot of those key things can be addressed day one for all. And that really is that by design, trying to include everyone in that. So my real personal story is this. This is how I read. It's looking at one individual word, and going from one to the next, and that's because of my dyslexia. There's so many positive things about my dyslexia. There's so many things that I've had to come across. But actually things like this is actually, I can't read in mass, particularly in schools. So going from one to the next, you're trying to then read down here, and then you've forgotten what's next because you're trying to decode and trying to see what that word means. Headaches, all sorts. But actually something as simple as changing the background of your page to be that off-white or something like that can have such a difference. And that color can vary. I think I started with a green overlay that I used, and then it was a blue one and a pink one, whatever it might be. In fact, that it's just not white. The noise is reduced by that color gradient on top. And that is unique to all. So looking at a page like this, it could be a typical lesson that I've kind of framed this for. And what it really is thinking, actually, something as simple as just that pinch to zoom gesture means that that small font that people that can't read that as easy, actually I can zoom in on a word, and then I've got easier to focus on each one of these as I'm going through the text. Makes it so much easier for all. Just by clicking on this one here, I can have the attached audio. So then the teacher or somebody can have that read to them. With the built-in immersive reader, so that it can have it read back to me. I can pick up the nouns, I can just read line by line. I can have it translated into a language that one can read. All those little things, going back to the main point of by design, it's all in there. Giving an example, quickly read this. Great. Now read that one. Fantastic. Now read that one. Now let's do a quiz about it. I think that's far too often the case. I mean, I'm doing it for the example here, but we're asked our students to read this, or do this, and we're not giving them the time. But actually one student is more than capable of reading at that speed, but somebody else, absolutely no chance. So they're going to give up. They're not going to bother reading that because they know they haven't got time anyway. And rather than being called out on dyslexia or called out on the inability to have that, actually what can they do to get that praise or attention? And then we're having other behaviours that are happening in the classroom. Built-in assessments. Actually, let's put it on student pacing as well. So whilst I've got that assessment going there, I can have that on student pacing so I can go back as a learner and read the parts that I can't read. I can't maintain all that information at once, but just by giving that lesson to the students, giving it their work, then they can read through that and they've got then their own skills set in that. So that really is what we're referring to, what the research refers to, and what we've believed for so long is that by design, if you can make your lessons by design, accommodating for all, the neurotypical, the neurodiverse, the everybody, as much as possible, then that will really support the learners, like myself, when I was in the classroom and elsewhere.
You've heard the stories. To make an impact in your classroom, click the link below to access the research.